Gurudevo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Om Ganana Ganapati Gammavamahe Kavin Kavinam Upavastravastramam Jeshtarajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspada Anushrundhoti Visnida Sadhanam Mahaganadipataye Namaha Om Keshwaya Namaha Om Narayana Namaha Om Madhuvaya Namaha Om Govindaya Namaha Om Vishnuve Namaha Matsudranaya Namaha Trivikramaya Namaha Namaha Sridharaya Namaha Rishikeshaya Namaha Padmanabhaya Namaha Damodaraya Namaha Sankarshnaya Namaha Vasudevaya Namaha Pradyumnaya Namaha Niruddhaya Namaha Purushottamaya Namaha Dokshaya Namaha Namaya Namaha Achyutaya Namaha Janardhanaya Namaha Upendraya Namaha Hare Namaha Sri Krishna Namaha Hari Om. Dear friends and devotees, we came to the 20th chapter of Ekadasha Skanda, or 11th canto of Mahabhagavata Purana. In this chapter, the process of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga are described by Lord Krishna. The Vedic Shastras are the words expressing the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In these Vedic literatures is found an outlook of duality based on such concepts as the Varnashrama system, and at the same time, the Vedas reject this dualistic vision sometimes. Uddhava, desiring to understand the reason why the scriptures contain such conflicting ideas and how these might be reconciled, inquired from Lord Sri Krishna about this matter. In response to Uddhava's discussion, Supreme Lord Krishna replied that the Vedas describe the process of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga for facilitating the attainment of liberation. Attainment of liberation. Karma Yoga is designated for those persons who are not detached and who are full of gross desires. Jnana Yoga is for those who are detached from the fruits of activity and have given up material endeavors. And Bhakti Yoga is for those persons who have taken to the principle of Yukta Vairagya, appropriate renunciation. As long as one has not become uninterested in enjoying the fruits of his own work, or as long as one's faith in the topics of discussion of the Supreme Person of Godhead on the path of devotional service has not awakened, then one must continue to fulfill all the prescribed duties of his karma. But neither the renunciation nor the devotee of the Supreme Lord need not carry out ritualistic duties. It's not that important. Ritualistic duties may not be important. But neither the renunciation nor the devotee of the Supreme Lord need carry out ritualistic duties. Persons who follow their own duty, who abandon that which is forbidden, and who are free from greed and other unhealthy characteristics attain either monastic knowledge or else, if they are fortunate, devotion to the Supreme Lord Godhead. Such knowledge and devotion can be achieved in the human form of life, which is therefore a desirable object both for those living in hell and for the other gods. The human body, even though it awards the whole purpose of existence in the form of knowledge and devotion, is ephemeral. Therefore, one who is discriminating should soberly strive for liberation before the death comes. The human body, even though it awards the whole purpose of existence in the form of a knowledge and devotion, is ephemeral. Therefore, one who is discriminating should soberly strive for liberation before the death comes. The human body is like a boat. Sri Gurudeva is the helmsman, and the mercy of the Supreme Lord is the favorable breeze. If the person who has attained such a rare boat in the form of a human body does not desire to cross over the ocean of material existence, he is in fact the killer of the soul. The mind is fickle, but one should not indifferently allow it to act as it will. Rather, one should conquer the senses and the vital air, and by intelligence endowed with the qualities of goodness, should bring the mind under control. and the mind finally becomes stable, one should continue to meditate about the process of creation of all material things in sequence from subtle to gross, and of their destruction in reverse sequence of gross to subtle. One who has a sense of detachment and renunciation can give up false identification with the body and other sense objects by constantly studying the instructions of his spiritual master, by the yoga practice of yama and niyama and so forth, by cultivation of transcendental knowledge, by worship of Lord Krishna and meditation upon the supreme person of Godhead Vishnu, one can remember the super soul. Virtue or guna means to remain steadfast in the objects of one's particular platform of qualification. By developing the desire to reject one's accumulated material association, by pursuing the injunctions of what is good and what is bad, all of one's inauspicious material activities become diminished. By devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna or Vishnu, all perfections are achieved. Anyone who renders service to the Supreme Lord by constant devotional service will be able to steadily fix his mind upon the Supreme Lord, and thus all desires for the sense gratification sitting within the heart will be destroyed to the root. When one directly perceives the presence of the Supreme Lord, his false ego becomes completely eradicated. All of his doubts are shattered, and heaps of material activities become diminished to nil. For this reason, the devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead do not consider knowledge and renunciation to be the means for achieving the highest benefit. For this reason, when one directly perceives the presence of the Supreme Lord, Vishnu, his false ego becomes completely eradicated. All of his doubts are shattered, and heaps of material activities become diminished to nil. For this reason, the devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead do not consider knowledge and renunciation to be the means for achieving the highest benefit. Only in the heart of a person who is devoid of material desire and disinterested in material things can devotional service to the Lord arise. The piety and the impiety that result from the ritualistic injunctions and prohibitions cannot be applied to the unalloyed pure devotees of the Supreme Lord. So Uddhava is asking questions, and Lord Krishna is going to answer this. The chapter begins with first shloka with Uddhava Vacha. Vidishcha pratishedaschya nigamohishwarasya te abekshateru aravindaksha gunam dosha karmanam gunam dosham cha karmanam. Uddhava says, my dear Lotus Eyed Krishna, you are the Supreme Lord, and thus the Vedic literatures consisting of positive and negative injunctions constitute your order. Such literatures focus upon the good and bad qualities of the work. At the end of the previous chapter, Lord Krishna stated, Guna dosha, drishtya dosha gunas, tubhya varjitaha, focusing upon the material piety and the sin is itself a discrepancy. Since actual piety means to transcend both of them. Sri Uddhava now pursues this point so that Lord Krishna will give a more elaborate explanation of this difficult subject matter. Sri Uddhava here states that the Vedic literatures, which constitute the laws of God, deal with piety and sin. Therefore, it must be clarified how one transcends activities recommended in the Vedas. According to the Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura, Uddhava suddenly understood Lord Krishna's purpose in this world. Lord Krishna's purpose in the words he had just spoken, and to induce the Lord to elaborate upon this interesting point of Uddhava, outwardly challenged to the Lord's statement. Varnashrama vikalpancha pratilomānulomajam dravyadeshavaya kalan surgam narakamevacha. According to the Vedic literature, the superior and inferior varieties found in the human social system, varnashrama, are due to the pious, sinful modes of family planning. According to the Vedic literature, the superior and inferior varieties found in the human social system, Varnashrama, are due to pious and sinful modes of family planning. This piety and sin are constant points of reference in the Vedic analysis of the components of a given situation, namely the material ingredients, place, age, and time. Indeed, the Vedas reveal the existence of material heaven and hell, which are certainly based upon piety and sin. According to Vedic literature, the superior and inferior varieties found in the human social system, Varnashrama, are due to pious and sinful modes of family planning. Thus, piety and sin are constant points of reference in the Vedic analysis of the components of a given situation, namely the material ingredients, place, age, and time. Indeed, the Vedas reveal the existence of material, heaven, and hell, which are certainly based on piety and sin. Pratiloma indicates the combination of a superior woman with an inferior man. For example, Vaidihaka community consists of those born of Shudra father and Brahman mother, whereas the Sutas are those born from Kshatriya father and Brahmana mother, or from Shudra father and Kshatriya mother. Anuloma indicates those born from a superior father and inferior mother. The Murdhvasikta are born of Brahmana father and Kshatriya mother. Ambastas are those born from Brahmana father and Vaishya's mother, and they often become medical men. Karana indicates those born of Vaishya father and Shudra mother, or by Kshatriya father. Karana indicates those born of Vaishya father and Shudra mother, or of a Kshatriya mother, or of a Kshatriya father and Vaishya mother. That such mixing of caste is not very much appreciated in the Vedic culture is demonstrated in the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna was very much worried that the death of so many Kshatriyas on the battlefield would lead to the mixing of superior women with inferior men, and on those grounds he objected to fighting. In any case, the entire Vedic social system is based on distinguishing between the piety and the sin. And Sri Uddhava is encouraging the Lord to explain more elaborately his statement that one should transcend both piety and sin. Shloka number 3. Gunadosha vidha drishta mantarena vachastavaha niha shreyasam kalam ram nisheda vidilakshanam. Nisheda vidilakshanam. Without seeing the difference between the piety and the sin, how can one understand your own instructions in the form of Vedic literatures, which order one to act piously and forbid one to act sinfully? Furthermore, without such authorized Vedic literatures, which ultimately award liberation, how can human being achieve the perfection of life? If one does not accept the necessity of performing pious activities and avoiding sinful activities, it becomes very difficult to understand authorized religious scriptures. And without such scriptures, how can human beings attain salvation? This is the essence of Sri Uddhava's question. Shloka number 4. Pitrudeva Manushyanam Vedaschakchustuveshvara Shreyastvanupalabdherte Sadhya Sadhana Yorapi. Sadhya Sadhana Merapi. My dear Lord, in order to understand those things beyond direct experience, such as spiritual liberation or attainment of heaven and other material enjoyments beyond our present capacity, and in general, to understand the means and end of all the things, the forefathers, the gods, and human beings must consult the Vedic literatures, which are your own laws, for these constitute the highest evidence of revelation. One might argue that while human beings are certainly prone to ignorance, the elevated forefathers and gods are considered to be all-knowing within universal affairs. If such superior beings would communicate with earth, then everyone could bypass Vedic knowledge in achieving his personal desire. This concept is denied here by the words Vedas, Chakshush. Even the gods and forefathers have at best an ambiguous conception of supreme liberation, and even in material affairs, they are subject to personal frustration. Although the gods are all powerful in awarding material benedictions to inferior species such as human beings, they are sometimes thwarted in their personal programs of sense gratification. A rich businessman, for example, may have no difficulty in paying the insignificant salary of one of his innumerable workers. But the same wealthy man may be completely frustrated in his dealings with his own family and friends, and may also be defeated in his attempts to expand his fortune by further investments. Although a rich man appears to be all powerful to his subordinate workers, although a rich man appears to be all powerful to his subordinate workers, he must personally struggle to fulfill his personal desire. Similarly, the gods and forefathers encounter many difficulties in maintaining and expanding their celestial standard of living. Similarly, the other gods and forefathers encounter many difficulties in maintaining and expanding their celestial standard of living. They must therefore constantly take shelter of superior Vedic knowledge. Even in the administration of cosmic affairs, they strictly follow the guidelines of the Vedas, which are the laws of God. Even in the administration of cosmic affairs, they strictly follow the guidelines of the Vedas, which are the laws of God. If such fabulous entities as other gods must take shelter of the Vedas, we can just imagine the position of human beings who are frustrated virtually every step of their lives. Every human being should accept Vedic knowledge as the highest evidence in material and spiritual affairs. Uddhava points out to the Lord that if one accepts the authority of Vedic knowledge, it is seemingly impossible to reject the concept of material piety and sin. Thus, Uddhava persists in examining the Lord's controversial statement at the end of the last chapter. The Uddhava persists in examining the Lord's controversial statement at the end of the last chapter. Now, the fifth sloka is by Lord Krishna. Bhagavanuvacha yogastrayo maya prokta nunam shreyo viditsaya jnanam karmancha bhaktischa nopayonyo stikutrajit. My dear Lord, the distinction observed. Bhagavan Krishna is telling this. How is it possible? Oh, that's the last question of Uddhava. That's the last question of Uddhava. Fifth sloka. Gunadosha vidadhashta nigamatrena sastutaha nigamena papadascha vidayatina brahmaha. This is Uddhava is telling to Lord Krishna. My dear Lord, the distinction observed between the piety and the sin comes from your own Vedic knowledge and does not arise by itself. If the same Vedic literature subsequently nullifies such distinction between piety and the sin, there will certainly be confusion. In the Bhagavad Gita, 15th shloka, 15th chapter, Lord Krishna says, Vedaisa cha survivor aham eva vedyaha. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I know the Vedas as it is. Vedic knowledge emanates from the breathing of personality of Godhead. Therefore, whatever Lord Krishna speaks is Veda, or perfect knowledge. The Vedic literatures are full of descriptions of piety and sin. But Lord Krishna's statement that one should transcend piety and sin is also to be understood as Vedic knowledge. Since Sri Uddhava has understood this point and therefore requests Lord Krishna to clear up an apparent contradiction. Ultimately, the material world gives the living entities a chance to satisfy their perverted desires and at the same time gradually achieve the liberation of going back home, back to Godhead or Vaikuntaloka. Thus, material piety must be considered a means and never an absolute, absolute end, since the material world itself is not absolute, being temporary and limited. The personality of Godhead Lord Krishna is himself the reservoir of all virtue and goodness. Those persons and activities that please the Lord are to be considered virtuous, and those that displease him are to be considered sinful. There cannot be any other there cannot be any other permanent definition of these terms. If one becomes mundane, moralist, forgetting the Supreme Lord, one's position is certainly imperfect, and one will not achieve the ultimate goal of piety, going back home, back to Godhead, Vaikuntaloka. On the other hand, there is a great fear among the moralists that if the distinction between the piety and the sin is minimized, people will commit many atrocities in the name of God. In the modern world, there is no clear understanding of spiritual authority, and more men consider any appeal to transcend morality to be an invitation to fanaticism, anarchy, violence, and corruption. Thus, they regard material and moral principles as more important than directly trying to please God. Because this point is controversial, Uddhava is anxiously requesting Lord to give clear explanation. Now Bhagavan Uvacha starts. Yogastrayo maya proktanudam shrayo viditsaya jnanam karmancha bhaktischa nopayonyo osti kutrajita. Lord Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna says, my dear Uddhava, because I desire that human beings may achieve perfection, I have presented three paths of advancement. The path of knowledge is Jnana Yoga, the path of work is a Karma Yoga, path of devotion is Jnana Yoga. Path of work is Karma Yoga, path of devotion is a Bhakti Yoga. Besides these three, there is absolutely no other means of elevation. Ultimately, the goal of philosophical speculation, pious regulated work, and devotion service is the same, Krishna consciousness. As stated by the Lord in Bhagavad Gita, all of them, as they surrender to me, I reward accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects. O son of Pratha, although all authorized process of human perfection ultimately lead to Krishna consciousness or love of God, various performers have specific propensities and qualifications and thus gravitate to different methods of self-realization. Lord Krishna here describes the three authorized processes together in order to emphasize that their ultimate goal is one. At the same time, philosophical speculation and regulated pious work can never be considered equal to pure love of Godhead. It's important people to understand, devotees to understand. Philosophical speculation and regulated pious work can never be considered equal to pure love of Godhead. As the Lord has elaborately clarified in the previous chapter, the word Traya or three indicates that despite their ultimate oneness of purpose, the three paths the word Traya or three indicates that despite their ultimate oneness of purpose, the three paths display diversity in progress and achievement. One cannot achieve the same result by mere speculation or piety that one achieves by directly surrendering to the personality of Godhead. Depending completely on His mercy and friendship, the word karma here indicates work dedicated to the personality of Godhead. As described in Bhagavad Gita, work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed, otherwise work binds one to this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction, and in that way you will always remain unattached and free from bondage. In the process of Jnana, one works. In the process of Jnana Yoga, one seeks impersonal liberation by merging into the glaring effluence of the personality of Godhead. Such liberation is considered hellish by the devotees, because by merging they loses all awareness of the supreme principal feature of the Lord as Bhagavan, the supreme person. The performers of karma or regulated work seek the three aspects of human progress. The performers of karma yoga or regulated work seek the three aspects of human progress other than liberation, namely religiosity, economic development, and sense gratification. The fruitive workers think that by exhausting each of their innumerable material desires, they will gradually come out of the dark tunnel of material existence into the clear night of spiritual liberation. This process is very dangerous and uncertain, because not only is there virtually no limit to material desires, but even a slight flaw in the process of regulated work constitutes sin and throws one off the path of progressive life. The devotees directly aim for love of Godhead and are therefore most pleasing to the Supreme Lord. In any case, all three divisions of Vedic elevations depend completely on the mercy of Lord Krishna. One cannot progress along with one of these paths without blessing of the Lord Krishna. Other Vedic processes such as austerity, charity, and so forth are included within the three primary divisions described here. Nirvindanam jnana yogo nyasinamiha karmasu teshna nirvinna chittana karma yogastu kaminam Among these three paths, jnana yoga, the path of philosophical speculation, is recommended for those who are disgusted in material life and those attached to ordinary fruitive activities. Those who are not disgusted with the material life, having many desires to yet to fulfill, should seek perfection through the path of karma yoga. In this verse, the Lord reveals the different propensities that lead human beings to adopt different process of perfection. Those who are frustrated in the ordinary material life of the society, friendship, and love, and who understand that promotion to heaven simply brings further domestic miseries, take directly to the path of knowledge. Through authorized philosophical discrimination, they transcend the bonds of material existence. Those who are still desirous of enjoying material society, friendship, and love, and who are excited by the prospect of going with their relatives to material heavenly planets, cannot take directly to the path. The path of rigorous philosophical advancement, which requires great austerity. Such persons are advised to remain in family life and offer the fruits of their work to Supreme. In this way, they also can become perfect and gradually learn detachment from any material life. Shloka number 8. Idrichaya matkatathau jatastrudustu yappuman na nirmanno natikastu natisakto bhakta yogosya siddhidaha. If somehow or the other, by good fortune, one develops a faith in hearing and chanting of glories, such a person, being neither very disgusted nor attached to material life, should achieve perfection through the path of loving devotion to me. That's what Lord Krishna says. If somehow or the other one gets the association of pure devotees of the Lord and hears from them the transcendental message of Lord Krishna, then one has the chance to become a devotee of the Lord. As mentioned in the previous verse, Those who become disgusted with the material life take to impersonal philosophical speculation and rigorously try to stamp out any trace of personal existence. Those who are still attached to material sense gratification try to purify themselves by offering the fruits of their ordinary activities to the Supreme. A first class candidate for pure devotional service, on the other hand, is neither completely disgusted nor attached to material life. He does not desire to pursue he he does not desire to pursue ordinary material existence any further because it cannot award. A first class candidate for pure devotional service, on the other hand, is neither completely disgusted with nor attached to material life. He does not desire to pursue ordinary material existence any further because it cannot award real happiness. Therefore, the candidate who wants to have a real happiness, a person, he does not desire to pursue ordinary material existence any further because it cannot award real happiness. Nevertheless, a candidate for devotional service does not give up all hope of perfecting personal existence. A person who avoids the two extremes of material attachment and impersonal reaction, a person who avoids the two extremes of material attachment and impersonal reaction to material attachment, and who somehow or other gets association of pure devotees faithfully hearing their message, is a good candidate for going back to home or going back to Godhead or Vaikuntha as described here by the Lord. तावत् कर्माणि कुर्वीता न निविद्येत यावता मत्कथा श्रवणदौ वा श्रद्धा यावत् जायते. As long as one is not satisfied by fruitive activity and has not awakened his taste for devotional services by Shravana, Kirtana, Vinaya, one has to act according to the negative, one has to act according to regulative principles of the Vedic injunction. Unless one has developed from faith in Lord Krishna, association with the pure devotees, and is thus engaged full time in the devotional service of the Lord. One should not neglect ordinary Vedic principles and duties as stated by the Lord Himself. The Shruti and Smruti literatures are to be understood as my injunctions, and one who violates such codes is to be understood as violating my will and thus opposing me. Although such a person may claim to be my devotee, he is not actually Vaishnava. The Lord here states that if one has not developed a firm faith in the process of chanting and hearing the slokas of praising the God Krishna, one must comply with the ordinary. One must comply. The Lord here states that if one has not developed firm faith in the process of chanting and hearing, one must comply with the ordinary injunctions of Vedic literature. There are many symptoms by which one can recognize an advanced devotee of the Lord. In the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated, one who is actually engaged in advanced devotional service immediately develops both clear knowledge of the Krishna consciousness and detachment from the non-developmental activities. One who is not situated in this platform must comply with the ordinary injunctions of Vedic literatures or risk becoming inimical to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. On the other hand, one who has developed a great faith in the devotional service of Lord Krishna does not hesitate to do anything that will further the mission of the Lord as stated in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Anyone who has taken shelter of the lotus feet of Mukunda, Lord Krishna, the giver of liberation, giving up all kinds of obligations, and has taken to the path in the salvation, anyone who has taken shelter of the lotus feet of Mukunda, the giver of liberation, giving up all kinds of obligation, and has taken to the path in all seriousness, owes neither duties nor obligation to the gods, other gods, sages, general living entities, family members, humankind, and forefathers. Srila Jiva Goswami points out in this regard that when a person fully surrenders to Lord Krishna, he takes the shelter of the Lord's promise to liquidate all other responsibilities. And this devotee thus becomes fearless by meditating on the Lord's promise of protection. Thus, however, those, however, who are materially attached are frightened by the prospect of hill surrender to the God. Those, however, who are materially attached are frightened by the prospect of full surrender to the Supreme Personality Godhead, thereby revealing their inimical materiality toward the Lord. Sudharmasto yajna yajanne dharanashi kama uddavaha nayati surga narako yadannenya samacharat. My dear Uddhava, a person who is situated in his prescribed duty, properly worshipping by Vedic sacrifices, but not desiring the fruitive results of such worship, will not go to the heavenly planets. Similarly, by not performing forbidden activities, he will not go to hell. So Lord Krishna says to Uddhava, a person who is situated in his prescribed duty, properly worshipping by Vedic sacrifices, but not desiring the fruitive result of such worship, will not go. The perfection of Karma Yoga is described here. One who does not desire fruitive rewards for his religious activities The text number 11. Asmim loke vartamanaha swadharmasto naga shuchihi jnanam mushiddham apnoti madbhaktivam yadruchaya. One who is situated in his prescribed duty, free from sinful activities and cleansed of material contamination, in this very life obtains transcendental knowledge or by fortune devotional service unto me. Asmin loke indicates one's present duration of life. Before the death of one's present body, one can obtain transcendental knowledge or by a great fortune, pure devotion service to the Supreme Lord. The word Edruchaya indicates that if one somehow or other gets the association of pure devotees and hears them from them faithfully, one can achieve Krishna consciousness, the highest perfection of life. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura, only transcendental Asmin loke indicates one's present duration of life. Asmin means present. Before the death of one's present body, one can obtain transcendental knowledge or by great fortune, pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord. The word Yadrachaya indicates that if one somehow or the other gets the association of a pure devotees and hears from them faithfully, one can achieve Krishna consciousness, the highest perfection of the life, according to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura, although through the transcendental knowledge one obtains liberation. Whereas through pure devotional service, one can achieve a low love of Godhead, in which liberation is automatically the highest perfection of life. According to Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakura, through transcendental knowledge, one obtains salvation, liberation, whereas through pure devotion service, one can achieve love of God, in which liberation is automatically included. Both results are certainly superior and ordinary, fruitive activities by which one tries to enjoy much the same things. The highest perfection of life is important. Continue Bhakti Yoga, continue chanting Lord Krishna's bhajan and Sankirtana, one can achieve Krishna consciousness, the highest perfection life easily. According to Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakura, through transcendental knowledge, one obtains liberation, whereas through pure devotion service, one can achieve love of Godhead, in which liberation is automatically included in Bhakti Yoga. Both results are certainly superior to ordinary fruitive activities, by which one tries to enjoy much the same things that animals do. Whereas those who are inclined to serve only Lord Krishna advance the highest stages of love of Godhead in servitude, friendship, parental love, and the conjugal relationship. Now the shloka number 12. Swarginopetamichanti lokam nirayanastitha sadakam jnana bhaktibhyamamaham tadasadakam. The shloka number 12. The residents of both heaven and hell desire human birth on the earth planet because human life facilitates the achievement of transcendental knowledge and love of Godhead, whereas neither the residents of both heaven and hell desire human birth on the earth planet because human life facilitates the achievement of transcendental knowledge and love of Godhead, whereas neither heavenly nor hellish bodies efficiently provide such opportunities. Only the opportunity present in the earth. Srila Jiva Goswami points out that in material heaven, one becomes absorbed in extraordinary sense gratification, and in hell, one is absorbed in suffering. In both cases, there is a little impetus to acquire transcendental knowledge or pure love of Godhead. Excessive suffering or excessive enjoyment are thus impediments to spiritual advancement. You can't achieve more spiritual advancement if you are suffering or excessive enjoyment of this impediment. They call it the impediment. The shloka number 13. Nanaraha swargatim kangshen kim da vajasakshanaha nemam lokancha kangshet deha deshat prabhamadhyati deshat deha deva deshat deha veshat pradhamadhyati. A human being who is wise should never desire promotion to heavenly planets or residence in hell. Indeed, human beings should also never desire permanent residence on earth. For such absorption in the material body and material foolish. Indeed, a human body being should also never desire permanent residence on the earth. For by such absorption in the material body, one becomes flourishly negligent of one's actual self-interest. One who has achieved a human life in the earth has an excellent opportunity to attain spiritual liberation through Krishna consciousness or devotional service to the Lord Vishnu. Thus, one should not desire promotion to heaven or risk residence in hell, where excessive enjoyment or punishment. One should develop through a detachment from all aspects of categories of material existence and go back home, back to Godhead Vaikuntha, where life is eternal, peace. One should develop through detachment is so nice. I can stay here forever. One should develop through detachment from all aspects of categories of material existence and go back home, back to Godhead, Vaikuntha Loka, where life is eternal and full of bliss and knowledge. Lord Krishna now begins to develop his conclusive proof that actual Lord Krishna now begins to develop his conclusive proof that actual human progress lies beyond material pity and piety and the sin. The Lord first clarified that there are basically three methods of human elevation, namely Jnana, Karma, and Bhakti, three yogas, and that the goal is transcendental knowledge and ultimately love of God. Now the Lord explains that promotion to heavenly planets, the final goal of piety, as well as residence in hell. The result of sinful activities are both useless in fulfilling the actual purpose of life. Neither the material piety nor sin establish the eternal living entity in its constitutional position. Therefore, something more is required. Shloka number 14. एतद्विद्वान् पुरा मृत्योर्भवाय घटेत सः अप्रमत्त इदं ज्ञात्वा मर्त्यमप्यर्थ सिद्धिदम्. A wise person, knowing that although the material body is subject to the death, it can still award the perfection of one's life, should not foolishly neglect to take advantage of this opportunity before the death arrives. Shloka number 15. Chidyamanam emaraityē kritanīram manaspatiṃ khagah swakshetamutsaja kshemam yati palam patu kshemam yati halam pataha. Without attachment, a bird gives up the tree in which his nest was constructed when that tree is cut down by cruel men who are like death personified, and thus the bird achieves happiness in another place. Here the example is given detachment from the bodily concept of life. The living entity resides within the body just as a bird dwells within the tree. When thoughtless men cut down the tree, the bird, without lamenting the loss of its previous one. Here the example is given of detachment from the bodily concept of life. The living entity resides within the body, just as a bird dwells within the tree. When thoughtless men cut down the tree, the bird, without lamenting the loss of its previous nest, does not hesitate to establish its residence in another place. Shloka number 16. Ahoratrai sthidyamanam buddha yorbeve patuhu muttasangam param buddha niriya upashamriti. Knowing that one's duration of life is being similarly cut down by the passing of days and nights, one should be shaken by fear. In this way, giving up all material attachments and desire, one understands the Supreme Lord and achieves perfect peace. An intelligent devotee knows that the passing days and nights are exhausting one's duration of life. An intelligent devotee knows that the passing of days and nights are exhausting of one's duration of life, and he therefore gives up his futile attachment. To material sense objects. Instead, he strives to achieve permanent benefit in life. Just as the detached bird immediately gives up its nest and goes to another tree. Similarly, a devotee knows that there is no permanent opportunity for residence within the material world. Instead, he dedicates his working energy to achieving eternal residence in the kingdom of God, transcendental, transcendenting, transcending the modes of material nature by attaining Krishna's own virtual. An intelligent devotee knows that the passing days and nights are exhausting one's duration of life, and he therefore gives up his futile attachment to material sense objects. Instead, he strives to achieve permanent benefit in life. Just as the detached bird immediately gives up its nest and goes to another tree, similarly, a devotee knows that there is no permanent opportunity for residence within the material world. Instead, he dedicates Just as the detached bird immediately gives up its nest and goes to another tree, similarly, a devotee knows that there is no permanent opportunity for residence within the material world. Instead, he dedicates his working energy to achieving eternal residence in the kingdom of God, transcending the modes of material nature by attaining Krishna's own spiritual nature. The devotee at last obtains perfect peace in Vaikuntha. Text number 17. Nృదేహమాద్యం సులభం సుదుర్లభం ప్లవం సుకల్పం గురుకరుణాధారం మాయానుకూలేన నమస్వేతరితం పుమాన్ భవాబ్దిం న తటేత్స ఆత్మః. The human body, which can award all benefit in life, is automatically obtained by the laws of nature. Although it is very rare achievement, this human body can be compared to a perfectly constructed boat by having the spiritual master as the captain and instructions of the personality of Godhead as favorable winds impelling on its course. Considering all these advantages, a human being who does not utilize his human life to cross the ocean of material existence must be considered the killer of his own soul. The human body, which is obtained after passing through many inferior forms, is created in such a way that it can award the highest perfection of life. The human body, which is obtained after passing through many inferior forms, is created in such a way that it can award the highest perfection of life. A human being is supposed to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna or Vishnu, and the bona fide spiritual master is the appropriate guide for such service. The costless mercy of Lord Krishna or Vishnu is compared to favorable winds that help the boat of the body to ply smoothly on the course of back home, back to Godhead. Lord Krishna gives his personal instructions in Vedic literature, speaks through the bona fide spiritual master, and encourages, warns, and protects. The costless mercy of Lord Krishna is compared to a favorable winds that help the boat of the body to ply smoothly on the course back home, back to Godhead. Lord Krishna gives his personal instructions in Vedic literature, speaks through the bona fide spiritual master, and encourages and warns and protects his sincere devotee from within the devotee's heart. Such merciful guidance of the Lord moves a sincere soul quickly on the path back to Godhead. But one who cannot understand that the human body is a suitable boat for crossing the ocean of material existence will see no need to accept Satan in the form of the spiritual master, and will not at all appreciate the favorable winds of the Lord's mercy. He has no chance achieving the goal of human life, acting against his own life, his own self-interest. But one who cannot understand that the human body is suitable boat for crossing the ocean of material existence will see no need to accept a captain in the form of a spiritual master, and will not at all appreciate the favorable winds of the Lord's mercy. He has no chance of achieving the goal of human life, acting against his own self-interest. He gradually becomes the killer of his own soul. The sloka number 18. Yadarambeshu nirvindo viraktam samyatendriyaha abhyasenatmano yogi darahedachalam manaha. Darahedachalam manaha. A transcendentalist, having become disgusted and hopeless in all endeavors for material happiness, completely controls the senses and develops detachment. By spiritual practice, he should then fix the mind on the spiritual platform. A transcendentalist, having become disgusted and hopeless in all endeavors for material happiness, completely controls A transcendentalist, having become disgusted and hopeless in all endeavors of material happiness, completely controls the senses and develops detachment. By spiritual practice, he should then fix the mind on the spiritual platform without deviation. The inevitable result of material gratification is disappointment and pain that sears the heart. One becomes gradually hopeless and despondent in material life. Then, receiving good instructions from the Lord or his devotee, one transforms one's material disappointment into spiritual success. Actually, Lord Krishna is our only true friend, and this simple understanding can bring one to a new life of spiritual happiness in the company of the Lord. Daryamanam manohargi brahmya darshanamastitam atindritonu rodhena marganhetma vashamnayet. Whenever the mind being concentrated on the spiritual platform is suddenly deviated from its spiritual position, one should carefully bring it under the control of self, mind, and by following the prescribed means. Although one is seriously engaging the mind in Krishna consciousness, the mind is so flickering that it may suddenly be deviated from its spiritual position and path. One should then carefully bring that mind back under the control of the Atma, self. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita that if one is too austere or too sensuous, one cannot control the mind. Sometimes one may bring the mind under control by allowing the material senses limited gratification. For example, although one may eat austerely from time to time, when the mind desires sinful gratification, such as illicit sex or intoxication, one must simply tolerate the mind's foolishness and by strenuous efforts to push on with Krishna consciousness and neglect the materialistic benefits. Then the waves of illusion will soon subside and the path of advancement will again open wide. Again, the doors open to reach Vaikuntha or Krishna Loka. This text number 20. Manogatim na videtya prano chitindriyaha sattva sampannaya buddha mana atmavasham nayet. One should never lose sight of the actual goal of mental activities, but rather conquering the life, air, and senses and utilizing intelligence strengthened by the mode of goodness. One should never lose sight of actual goal of mental activities, but rather conquering the life, air, and senses and utilizing the intelligence strengthened by the mode of goodness, that is Sattvika Guna. One should bring the mind under control of the self, himself, Atma. Although the mind may suddenly wander outside the jurisdiction of self-realization, one must bring the mind back under the control by clear intelligence in the mode of goodness, that is Sattvika Guna. The best solution is to keep the mind always busy in the service of Lord Krishna so that the mind cannot wander onto the dangerous path of the sense gratification. Headed by sex attraction, the material world is naturally inclined to accept The best solution is to keep the mind always busy in the service of Lord Krishna, in Bhakti Marga, in continuing the bhajan activities and spiritual activities, so the mind cannot wander onto the dangerous path of sense gratification headed by sex attraction. The material mind is naturally inclined to accept material objects at every moment. Therefore, unless the mind is seriously brought under control, there is no possibility of becoming steady on the path of spiritual advancement. Shloka number 21. Yesha vai paramo yogo manas asangraha smrutaha hridayadvyattamanichvanna dhammasvevavruto muhu. Dhamyasyevavruto muhu. The sacred 21. An expert horseman desiring to tame a headstrong horse first lets the horse have his way for a moment and then pulling the reins gradually places the horse on the desired path. Similarly, the supreme yoga process is that by which one carefully observes the moments and desires of the mind and gradually brings them to under control. Just as an expert rider intimately knows the propensities of an untamed horse and gradually brings the horse under control, an expert yogi allows the mind to reveal its materialistic propensities and then controls them through superior intelligence. A learned transcendentalist withholds and supplies sense objects so that the mind and senses remain fully controlled, just as the horseman sometimes pulls sharply on the reins and sometimes allows the horse to run freely. The rider never forgets his actual goal of destination, that is Vaikuntha Loka, reaching Krishna Loka, and eventually places the horse on the right path. Similarly, a learned transcendentalist, even though sometimes allowing the senses to act, never forgets the goal of severe realization. A learned transcendentalist, even though sometimes allowing the senses to act, never forgets the goal of self-realization, nor does he allow the senses to engage in sinful activity. So he is not going to allow, we should not allow our mind and senses in engaging in the sinful activities. Excessive austerity or restriction may result in great mental disturbance, just as pulling excessively on the reins of a horse may cause the horse to rear up against the rider. The path of self-realization depends upon clear intelligence, and the easiest way to acquire Shloka number 22. Sankena sarva bhavanam pratilomānulomataha bhavyāpyayam vanudhyayan mano yavat prasidati. Until one's mind is fixed on spiritual satisfaction, one should analytically study the temporary nature of all material objects, whether cosmic, earthly, or atomic. One should constantly observe the process of creation through the natural progressive function and the process of annihilation through the regressive function. For one who has taken his birth, death is certain. And for one who is dead, birth is certain. Therefore, in the unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. Manyo yavat prasaditi. Until one has established one's consciousness on the liberated platform of perfect knowledge, one must constantly ward off the attacks of illusion through the rigid analytic observation of material nature. The material mind may be attracted to sex, therefore, by spiritual intelligence, one should scrutinize the temporary nature of one's own body and the body that has artificially become the object of one's materialistic lust. One may apply this rigid analysis to all the material bodies, from the fantastic cosmic body of Lord Brahma down to that of most insignificant germ. As previously stated by Lord Krishna, One who is advanced in Krishna consciousness spontaneously avoids sense gratification and is constantly drawn by spiritual love into his relationship with Lord Krishna only. One who has not achieved the platform of spontaneous Krishna consciousness must remain constantly vigilant so as not to be grossly cheated by the material energy of Lord. One who tries to exploit the material energy ruins his spiritual life and experiences varieties of creatures. Shloka number 23. Nirvanyasya viraktasya purushasyoktavedinaha manustajati daurhatmam chintitasyanu chintitansanu. When a person is disgusted with the temporary illusory nature of this world and is thus detached from it, his mind, guided by the instructions of his spiritual master, considers again and again the nature of this world and eventually gives up the false identification with matter. Although it is difficult to control the mind, by constant practice, the mind can be spiritualized in Krishna consciousness by Bhakti Marga and Bhakti Yoga. A sincere disciple constantly remembers the instructions of his spiritual master and thereby faces again and again the stark truth that the material world is not the ultimate reality. By detachment and perseverance, the mind gradually gives up its propensity towards sense gratification. Thus, illusion loses its grip on a sincere Krishna consciousness devotee. Gradually, the purified mind completely gives up the false identification with this world and transfers its attention to the spiritual platform. The one is considered to be perfect in yoga system. Shloka number 44. Yamadibir yoga patairani kshaksha cha vidyaya mamurchi pasana bhirva nanair yoge smaren manaha. Through the various disciplinary regulations and the purificatory procedures of the yoga system, through logic and spiritual education, or through worship and adoration of me, one should constantly engage his mind in remembering the personality of Godhead. Shloka number 25. If because of momentary inattention a yogi accidentally commits an abominable activity, then by the very practice of yoga he should burn to ashes. He should burn to ashes the sinful reaction without at any time employing any other procedure. The word yogena here indicates jnanena yogena, bhaktya yogena, since these two transcendental systems have the power to burn sinful reaction to ashes. It should be clearly understood that word ahams, amahas or sin here refers to an accidental fall down against one's desire. Premeditated exploitation of the mercy of the Lord can never be excused. Significantly, the Lord forbids any extraneous purificatory rites since the transcendental yoga systems are themselves the most purifying process, especially Bhakti Yoga and Bhakti Marga. If one gives up one's regular prescribed duties to perform a special ritual or penance, trying to purify a sinful reaction, then one will be guilty of the additional fault of giving up one's prescribed duties. One should pick oneself up from an accidental fall down and go on vigorously with one's prescribed duties in life without being unnecessarily discouraged. One should certainly lament and feel ashamed, and there will be no purification. However, if one becomes overly depressed at an accidental fall down, one will not have the enthusiasm to go on to perfection. Lord Krishna also states in Bhagavad Gita, even if one commits the most abominable actions, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly angulated. Even if one commits the most abominable actions, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated. The most important point is that one should be properly engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. then only he will come to the Lord gradually. For then the Lord will excuse and purify an accidental fall down. One should, however, be most cautious to avoid such an unhappy event. Shloka number 26. स्वे स्वेधिकारे या निष्ठा गुण परिकीर्तितः कर्मणां जात्यशुद्धानामनेन नियमः कृतः गुणदोष विधानेन संगानां त्याजनेच्छया. It is firmly declared that the steady adherence of transcendentalists to their respective spiritual positions constitutes real piety, and that sin occurs when a transcendentalist neglects his prescribed duty. One who adopts the standard of piety and sin, sincerely desiring to give up all past association with sense gratification, is able to subdue materialistic activities which are by nature impure. Lord Krishna here explains more clearly that those persons avoid Lord Krishna here explains more clearly that those persons directly engaged in self-realization, either through Jnana Yoga or Bhakti Yoga, need not give up their regular duties and perform special penances to atone for any accidental fall down. The actual purpose of Vedic literature is to direct one back home, back to Godhead, and not to encourage material sense gratification. Although the Vedas recommend innumerable rituals for promotion to heavenly planets and enjoyment of all varieties of material opulence, such materialistic rewards are meant only to engage materialistic people who otherwise would become demonic. To purify an accidental fall down, one who is engaged in transcendental realization need not adopt any procedure beyond his own spiritual practice. The words Sanganam Tejanechaya indicates that one should not practice Krishna consciousness or self-realization superficially or casually. Rather, one should sincerely and earnestly desire freedom from one's past sinful life. Similarly, the words Ya Nischita indicate that one must constantly practice Krishna consciousness. Thus, essential piety is to give up material sense gratification and engage in the loving service of the Lord. One who engages his senses, mind, and intelligence 24 hours a day in the Lord's service is the most pious person, and the Lord personally protects such surrendered soul. This is very important for all the devotees to know. Essential piety is to give up material sense gratification completely and engage in the loving service of the Lord. One who engages in his senses, mind, intelligence 24 hours a day, that means continuously, in the Lord's service is the most pious man. And Lord personally protects such surrendered soul. Lord Krishna protects those people who are engaged in continuous 24 hours chanting his names. He will be appreciated. People can ask the question, the devotees may ask question, how can 24 hours we can engage? People has to sleep at least 6 to 8 hours in the night. It is possible. This question is possible, and my guru was telling the answer for this question is, you chant 24 names of Narayana's names. Om Keshvaya Namaha, Narayana Namaha, Madhvaya Namaha, Govindaya Namaha, Vishnuvaya Namaha, Matsudranaya Namaha, Trivikramaya Namaha, Vamanaya Namaha, Sridharaya Namaha, Rishikeshaya Namaha, Padmanabhaya Namaha, Damodaraya Namaha, Sankarshnaya Namaha, Vasudevaya Namaha, Pradyumnaya Namaha, Niruddhaya Namaha, Purushottamaya Namaha, Adokshaya Namaha, Narasimhaya Namaha, Achyutaya Namaha, Janadraya Namaha, Upendraya Namaha, Hare Namaha, Sri Krishna Namaha. By chanting 24 names of Narayana before going to sleep, and keep on chanting until you completely sleep. And when you get up from the sleep, start chanting Krishna's name again. Then Lord Krishna allows to consider the sleeping hours is the prayer hours of the deity, of the devotee. So this sort of advice was given by Shankaracharya in my place in Sringeri. By doing sleeping hours, also chanting, you go to sleep, but you finish chanting without your knowledge. And when you get up, start chanting, then the continuation process of 24 hours can happen. It will be considered as 24 hours continuously is chanted. Now the shlokas 27 to 27 and 28. Jata shraddho matyathasu nirvinnaha sarva karmasu veda dukkhatmakahan kaman parityageshwanishwaraha tato bhajate mam pritaha shraddha dhrudha nischayah jushumanyaschantkaman dukko dharkancha gargayan. Having awakened faith in narrations of my glories, Lord Krishna is telling to Uddhava, having awakened faith in narrations of my glories, being disgusted with all material activities, knowing that all sense gratification leads to misery, but still being unable to renounce all sense enjoyment, my devotee should remain happy and worship me with a great faith and conviction. Even though he is sometimes engaged in sense enjoyment, my devotee knows that all sense gratification leads to miserable result, and he sincerely repents such activities. So even if somebody gone on the wrong direction, they should ask for Lord Krishna's mercy and promise that such mishap will not happen and continue on the devotional aspect of Lord Krishna's Bhakti Yoga, then you are all right. But you should not go back again to the materialistic life. The words Jata Shraddha, Mata Katsuhu are most significant here. By faithful hearing of the mercy and glories of the Lord Krishna or Lord Vishnu, one will gradually be freed from all material desire and clearly see at every moment the utter frustration of sense gratification. Chanting the glories of the Lord Vishnu with firm faith and conviction is a tremendously powerful spiritual process that enables one to give up all material association. There is actually nothing inauspicious in the devotional service of the Lord. Occasional difficulties experienced by a devotee are due to his previous material activities. On the other hand, the endeavor for sense gratification is completely inauspicious. Thus, sense gratification and devotional service are directly opposed to each other. In all circumstances, one should therefore remain the Lord's sincere servant, always believing in His mercy. Then one can certainly be, if sincere servant of Lord, always believing His mercy, then one will certainly go back home, back to Godhead of Krishna Loka. Now, 29th sloka. Proktena bhakti yogena bhajato ma sukanmane kama hridaya nashyanti sarve mai hridasthite. When an intelligent person engages constantly in worshipping Lord Krishna through loving devotional service to Lord Krishna, as described by Krishna in these lines, his heart becomes firmly situated in Lord Krishna. Thus, all material desires within the heart are destroyed. So, people who are constantly chanting Krishna's devotion activities and bhajan, they are always able to burn the materialistic desires and other matters of the life which are not going to help the solution of making a progress in Bhakti Yoga. Text 30. Vidyate hridayam grantischintyante sarva samshayaah kshiyante chasya karmani mai drushte kilatmani. The knot in the heart is pierced, all misgivings are cut to pieces, and the chain of fruitive actions is terminated when I am seen as the Supreme Person of Godhead. Hridaya Granthi indicates that the one's heart is bound to illusion by false identification with material body. One thus becomes absorbed in material sex pleasure, dreaming of innumerable combinations of male and female bodies. A person intoxicated by sex attraction cannot understand that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the reservoir of all pleasure and the supreme enjoyer. When a devotee achieves steadfastness in devotional service, feeling transcendental pleasure at every moment in the execution of his loving service to the Lord Krishna, the knot of the false identification is pierced and all his misgivings are cut to pieces. In illusion, we imagine that the living entity cannot be fully satisfied. without material sense gratification and speculative doubting of absolute truth. Materialistic persons consider sense enjoyment and speculative doubting to be essential for civilized life. A pure devotee, however, realizes that Lord Krishna is an unlimited ocean of happiness and a personification of all knowledge. This realization of Lord Krishna completely eradicates the twin tendencies of sense gratification and mental speculation. Thus, the chain of fruitive activities or karma automatically collapses, just as a fire collapses and goes out when its fuel is removed. Advanced devotional service automatically awards one liberation from material bondage, as confirmed by Lord Krishna now, and also Lord Kapila in his teachings to his mother. Jarayatya asyu o kosam nirgam anna layatha bhakti. Devotional service dissolves the subtle body of the living entity without separate effort. Just as a fire in the stomach digests all that we eat, Srila Prabhupada states in his purport to the verse, a devotee does not have to try separately to attain liberation. That very service to Supreme Personality of Godhead is the process of liberation, because to engage oneself in the service of the Lord is to liberate oneself from material entanglement. Sri Bilvamangala Thakura explained this position very nicely. He said, if I have unflinching devotion unto the lotus feet of Supreme Lord Vishnu, then mukti or liberation serves me as my maid servant. Mukti, the maid servant, is always ready to do whatever I ask. For a devotee, a liberation is not a problem at all. Liberation takes time without separate endeavor. The sloka number 31, Tasman mad bhakta yuktasya yogino vai madatmanaha najnanan nacha vairagyam prayo shreyo bhavedyaha. Therefore, for a devotee engaged in my loving service with mind fixed on me, the cultivation of knowledge and renunciation is generally not the means of achieving the highest perfection within this world. As a surrendered devotee of Lord Krishna does not seek perfection through the cultivation of knowledge and renunciation outside the loving service of the Lord. Devotional service to Lord Krishna, being itself the supreme transcendental process, never depends upon the secondary methods involving the cultivation of knowledge and renunciation by chanting and hearing the glories of the personality of Godhead. A devotee automatically realizes all knowledge, and as the devotee's attachment to the Lord increases, he automatically gives up the attachment for the inferior material nature. The Lord has explicitly declared in the various previous verses that a devotee should not try to solve his lingering problems by means other than devotional service. Although a sincere devotee has surrendered heart and soul in loving service to the Lord Vishnu, there may be lingering material attachments that prevent the devotee from perfectly realizing transcendental knowledge. Devotional service, however, will automatically eradicate such lingering attachments in due course of time. If the devotee tries to purify himself through cultivation of knowledge and renunciation, which fall outside the scope of devotional service, there is danger of his being deviated from the Lord's lotus feet and falling down completely from the transcendental path. One who endures for purification outside the within these worlds, one's heart is bound by sex attraction, which disturbs one's meditation on the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Intoxicated by contact with a woman, the conditioned soul becomes artificially proud and forgets his loving servitude to Lord. Through determined cultivation of knowledge and detachment, a conditioned soul may try to purify himself without the mercy of Lord Krishna. But such a false pride is to be given up, just as one must give up the false pride of material attraction. When pure devotional service to the Lord is available to a conditioned soul, attraction to other process is certainly a deviation in his devotional career. Material desire stubbornly residing within the heart can be vanquished by taking full shelter of Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna without false confidence in one's own cultivation of knowledge and renunciation. One should depend fully on the mercy of Lord Krishna and at the same time strictly follow the rules and regulations of Bhakti Yoga as instructed by Lord Himself. Text 32 to 33. Sarvam madbhakti yogena madbhakto labate jasa swargapavargam madham katachintyadyman prachi nakinchit sadavo dhira bhaktya haikantino mama vanchintyapi maya dhattam kaivalya mapunarbhavam. Everything that can be achieved by fruitive activities, penance, knowledge, detachment, mystic yoga, charity, religious duties, and all other means of perfecting life is easily achieved by my devotee through loving service unto me. If somehow or the other my devotee desires promotion to heaven, liberation, or residence in my abode, he easily achieves such benedictions. Lord Krishna here reveals the transcendental glories of devotional service to the Lord. Although pure devotees are desireless, desiring only the Lord's service, sometimes a great devotee may desire the Lord's benediction to facilitate his loving service. In the sixth canto of Bhagavatam, we found that Sri Chitraketu, a great devotee of the Lord, desired promotion to heaven, so that accompanied by the most attractive ladies of the Vidyadhara planet, he could beautifully chant the glories of Lord. Similarly, Sri Sukavodo Swami, the great narrator of Srimad Bhagavatam, desiring to avoid entanglement in the illusory potency of the Lord, would not come out of his mother's womb. In other words, Shukadeva Goswami desired apavargam or liberation from Maya so that his devotional service would not be disturbed. Lord Krishna personally sent the illusory energy far away so that Shukadeva Goswami would come out of his mother's womb. Because of intense loving desire to serve the lotus feet of the Lord Krishna, a devotee may give also desire promotion to the spiritual world. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura, a devotee having given up the independent cultivation of knowledge and detachment may have firm faith in the devotional service of Lord Vishnu and yet remain slightly attached to the fruits of such activities. By expert fruitive activities, one gains residence in material heaven, and by cultivation of detachment, one is relieved of all bodily distress. If Lord Krishna detects within a devotee's heart the desire for each benedictions, the Lord can easily award them to his devotee. The word itraya in this verse indicates visiting old places, accepting religious vows, and so forth. Several auspicious processes of elevation are mentioned in the verse preceding this, but all the auspicious results of these processes are easily achieved by loving service to the Lord. Thus, all devotees of the Lord, in whatever stage of advancement, should dedicate their energy exclusively to the Lord's service, as affirmed in the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where Sukadeva Goswami, a person who has broader intelligence, whether he be full of all material desire, without any material desire, or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the Supreme Whole, the Personality of Godhead, all the time. Shloka number 34. न किञ्चित् साधवो धीरा भक्त्या हैकान्तिनो मम वाञ्छन्त्यपि मया दत्तं कैवल्यमुपनर्भवम्. Because my devotees possess saintly behavior and deep intelligence, they completely dedicate themselves to me and do not desire anything besides me. Indeed, even if I offer them liberation from birth to the death, they do not accept it. The words ekantino, haikantino mama. The words haikantino mama indicate that the pure devotees of the Lord, being saintly and most intelligent, dedicate themselves exclusively to the devotional service of the personality of Godhead Vishnu. Even when Lord offers them personal liberation from birth to the death, the devotees will not accept it. A pure devotee automatically gains an eternal life, bliss, and knowledge in the Lord's personal abode, and thus considers mere liberation without the loving service to the Lord to be most abominable. So we need to continue the loving service to the Lord Krishna is to be a continuous process in the Bhakti Marga. One who chants Lord Krishna's holy name or superficially serves the Lord with the motive of achieving impersonal liberation or material sense gratification cannot be considered a transcendental devotee of the Lord. So 100% mind and concentration on Lord Krishna without any mixing of materialistic ideas. As long as one desires mundane religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, or liberation, one cannot achieve the platform of samadhi or perfect self-realization. Every living entity is actually the eternal servant of Lord Krishna. Every living entity is actually the eternal servant of Lord Krishna and is constitutionally meant to engage in the loving service of the Lord without personal desire. This pure and supreme status of life is described in this verse by the Lord himself. People question, we are raising money to build a temple of Krishna. We are raising money to assist devotees of the Krishna's devotee who come to temple. So that part of work, as long as there is no self-importance to your own benefit, as long as the benefit goes to the Lord Krishna, temple, and devotees, you are safe. You're all right. Your desire to raise money to build a Krishna temple is okay, because as long as the money is meant for only Krishna's temple, not for anything else. Any devotional support to devotional people, devotees, is acceptable. You need to help devotees and support devotees. All the money what you got charity in the Krishna temple is meant for devotional benefit, devotees benefit, it is acceptable. Text 35. Nairapeksham param prahurneshreya samanalpakam tasma nirashisho bhaktar nirapeksha same bhavet. It is said that complete detachment is the highest stage of freedom. Therefore, one who has no personal desire and does not pursue personal rewards can achieve loving devotional service to me. Shloka number 36. Namaye kanta bhaktanam gunadoshodbhava gunaha sadhunam samachittanam buddhe paramupesham. Material piety and sin, which arise from the good and evil of this world, cannot exist within my unalloyed devotees, who, being free from material hankering, maintain steady spiritual consciousness in all circumstances. Indeed, such devotees have achieved me, the Supreme Lord, who am beyond anything that can be conceived by material intelligence. The words Buddhe Param, Buddhe Paramapesham, the words Buddhe Param indicate that the material modes of nature cannot be found within the pure devotee absorbed in the transcendental qualities of the Lord. In the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna clearly explains that a pure devotee is recognized by complete detachment from personal desire. Therefore, a pure devotee constantly engaged in a selfless service to Lord Krishna may not always observe the innumerable details of Vedic rituals and regulations. Such occasional negligency is not to be considered a transgression. Similarly, observance of ordinary material piety does not constitute the ultimate qualification of a soul surrendered to Lord Krishna. Love of Krishna and absolute surrender to the Lord Krishna will raise one immediately to the transcendental platform, whereas activities performed on the Lord's behalf are absolute, being an expression of God's will. Ordinary materialistic persons sometimes falsely claim this exalted status for their whimsical immortal activities and cause a great disturbance in society. So a constant continuation of spiritual activity is Bhakti Marga, and devotional activities of Lord Krishna will make a devotee successful in achieving Lord Krishna. Sloka, the last sloka of 37th sloka. Evametan maya adhishtanutishtanti me pataha kshemam vindanti mattanam yad brahmam paramam viduhu. Persons who seriously follow these methods of achieving me, which I have personally taught, attain freedom from illusion, and upon reaching my personal abode, they perfectly understand the absolute truth. The persons who seriously follow these methods of Bhakti Marga, Bhakti Yoga, and of achieving me, which I have personally taught, attain freedom from illusion, and upon reaching my personal abode, they perfectly understand the absolute truth. That's the end of this chapter 20th. Thus end the purports of the humble servants of His Divine A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to the 11th canto, the 20th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Pure Devotional Service Surpasses Knowledge and Detachment. 20ನೇ ಅಧ್ಯಾಯ ಮುಗಿಯಿತು. ಇತಿ ಶ್ರೀಮದ್ಭಾಗವತೆ ಮಹಾಪುರಾಣೆ ಪಾರಮಹಂಸ್ಯಾಂ ಸಂಹಿತಾಯಾಂ ಏಕಾದಶ ಸ್ಕಂದೆ ವಿಂಶೋಧ್ಯಾಯಃ. We finished 20th chapter today. नमोस्तु अनंताय सहस्रमूर्तये सहस्रपादाक्षिशिरोर्बाहुवे नमोस्तु अनंताय सहस्रपादाक्षिशिरोर्बाहुवे पुरुषाश्वते सहस्रकोटि युगधारिणे नमः. सहस्रकोटि युगधारिणे नमः. आकाशात् पतितं यथागतसागरं सर्वदेव नमस्कारः. श्रीकेशवं प्रजत्यो नमः. सर्ववेदेशत् पुण्यं सर्वतीर्थेषु यत्फलं तत्फलं प्राप्त वासनाद् वासुदेवस्य वासन्ते जगत्त्रयं सर्वभूतनिवासोऽसि वासुदेवं नमः इति कायेन वाचा मनसेन्द्रियैर्वा बुद्ध्यात्मना वा प्रकृते स्वभावात् करोमि यद्यत् सकलं परस्मै नारायणायेति समर्पयामि. नारायणायेति समर्पयामि. नारायणायेति समर्पयामि. नारायणायेति समर्पयामि. हरि ओम तत्सत्.